Schumacher's off. Schumacher's lost time.
Yeah.
Hill goes by.
Oh, out goes Schumacher.
The year is 1994. Racing games look like this, supercars look like this, and I look like this. Formula 1 also had one of its most controversial seasons, and in this video I'm going to analyse the onboard footage to see what actually happened in this championship deciding incident. Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill were in the first years of their F1 careers and neither had won a Formula 1 World Championship. Schumacher had a storming start to the year, winning 6 out of the first 7 races, whereas Hill had won only the one other race and picked up a couple of podiums. Then at the British Grand Prix, Schumacher was disqualified for overtaking Hill on the parade lap. He was actually given a 5-second penalty during the race, but his team told him to ignore the penalty and he got black flagged. He was disqualified from that Silverstone race, but the FIA were to investigate the incident further. At the halfway point in the championship, Schumacher was well ahead with 66 points, with Hill only on 39 points in second position. Back then, drivers didn't score as many points as they do today, and a win was only worth 10 points. A few races later at Spa, Schumacher was again disqualified, this time from first position. After Senna's death that year, rule makers had introduced a thin plank on the underside of the car, with a wear tolerance of 1mm, and Schumacher's Benetton had worn more than this amount. Things didn't get any better for Schumi when the FIA decided a 2-race ban was appropriate for ignoring the FIA at the Silverstone round. So he missed the next 2 races at Monza and Estoril, which Hill went on to win. So the 2 drivers went into the final round at the Australian Grand Prix separated by only 1 point, with the title to play for. Nigel Mansell had rejoined Williams after Senna's death and took pole ahead of Schumacher and Hill. Mansell got away poorly from the lights, so Schumacher took the lead, followed closely by Hill. The 2 drivers streaked away from the field but were only separated by a couple of seconds and things were extremely tight. Then on lap 35, Schumacher made a mistake at the East Terrace corner, and as Hill tried to overtake him, the 2 collided. So without further ado, let's jump into the footage to see exactly what happened. So first of all, let's go on board with Michael Schumacher. So here he is coming into the East Terrace corner, left-hander. You can see it's really bumpy, really tricky on the way into the corner. And you've got to remember that these old F1 cars from the mid-90s are very, very stiff. They're nowhere near as supple as today's modern Formula 1 cars. So over the bumps, they're really tricky. And you're a lot more likely to make a mistake in one of these cars. Plus, we're on a very bumpy course and in a very bumpy braking zone. So as you can see here, Schumacher's turned the car in, bringing it into the apex. And just at this point here, if you watch the steering wheel, you can see that he gets a huge amount of oversteer there, corrects it with some opposite lock. But already by that time, it's already too late and he's heading towards the wall. It's a big chunk of opposite lock. And you can see at this point in the footage, he's heading towards the wall. He probably knows that it's over. Straight into this concrete wall on the right hand side here. Front wheel first and then the rear of the car. Now as a driver, once you've made a mistake like this, all you're doing is praying that the car survived. Sometimes when you hit directly sideways into something, even if it's solid, you can get away with it. We see it quite a lot these days in modern Formula 1, especially at Canada, for example, into the Wall of Champions. The drivers can scrape that wall reasonably hard and get away with it. However, Schumacher's gone in quite hard here, and also these older Formula 1 cars, they had steel wishbones rather than today's carbon wishbones, which are obviously a lot stronger. So bringing the car back across the track, and at this point now, as it's coming back on, if you just watch his helmet, you can see that he checks his mirror, looks left just here to see where Hill is, because he knows that Hill's only a couple of seconds behind, before he then continues and looks into the next corner. But already by this point, Hill has got some feeling from the car, and you can see the way that he's playing with the steering wheel like this, even though the car's going in a straight line, that something's slightly broken, and Schumacher will know this. So now let's go on board with Damon Hill to see what he saw of the incident and to see how he positioned himself going through this sequence of corners. So again, he's bringing the car into the left-hander, really bumpy zone as you can see here, a slight lock-up with the left front there as he turns it in. And as he comes around, looking towards the exit of the corner where he'll have his vision way out in front of him, looking for that exit point, he can see that Schumacher is in the wall all the way up here, and his eyes must light up. His championship rival that he needs to overtake to win the championship is in the wall. Now, at this point, Hill won't know if Schumacher's got damage. It will only be Schumacher who knows if he's got damage. He hasn't seen the incident of Schumacher going in the wall. He's only seen the aftermath, and there isn't enough time for Hill to analyse Schumacher's car from speed or how it's reacting coming out of that corner for him to really understand what's actually happened to the car. You can see from this point of view, at this point, this is where Schumacher checks his mirror and actually moves the car across to the left-hand side. And you can see here, if we just wind it back a little bit, if you watch the left-hand tyre here, you can see that Hill isn't really expecting him to come so across the track so quickly, and he locks up this the left front here that he has to brake so severely. So even in that first move, Schumacher's a little bit naughty to come across so violently, and he knows that Hill's there because he's checked his mirror. So Hill almost locks up, brings the car back over to the right. Now for Hill, again, like I say, he doesn't know if Schumacher's car is damaged or not. He doesn't know if this is his only opportunity to overtake him. So he's brought the car back to the inside and he's going to dive up the inside to try and get past Schumacher and dispatch of him as quickly as possible. So now on to some external footage, just so we can see if Schumacher's car was actually damaged from that impact with the wall. Now, if you watch carefully, the rear right tyre, you can see here that part of the suspension is damaged. And Schumacher, actually, when you watch it in slow motion, is having to control the car. It's something like the rear toe link, which controls how straight the rear wheel is in line with the chassis of the car. I think that's broken, and so the rear wheel is able to move, but it's flapping around because it's not connected properly to the rear end of the car. And you can see now, if you watch it just in a bit quicker motion, that the car's moving around all over the place. So the question here is Schumacher responding to the car being broken, and that's why he's steering like this and checking his mirror to see if there's another car coming and not have them run into him? Or is he doing that to block Hill and try to potentially take him out of the race? So back on board with Hill, and we are just about to go up the inside of Schumacher here. Hill wants to dispatch of Schumacher as quickly as possible. He's diving up the inside. The gap is quite big. Schumacher's out quite wide. However, he is at least half a car's length ahead of Hill at this point. Hill's got the car on a tight line, but at this point he does lock the car up. He realises, and you can just see the front right tyre here of Schumacher, he realises that Schumacher isn't just letting him through, and Schumacher's coming across on not a normal racing line, but some variant of a racing line where he's coming from the outside of the track to the apex, and the Hill's there in this ever-closing gap. Quite a compromising position here for Hill, locked up with steering angle, moving out towards Schumacher on the outside of the circuit. So if we go forwards a few frames, you can see here that Schumacher has now driven down to the apex. Hill's all locked up. The two cars collide quite heavily, and then the rear wheel of Schumacher hits the front left of Hill and sends him up into the air. So as the car lands here, Schumacher's car lands, you can see that's him definitely out of the race. He was out of the race anyway because of the rear toe link, but now Hill knows that Schumacher is certainly out of the race. Now again, back with Schumacher, which is really the most important on board that we can look at to determine if Schumacher did intentionally turn across Damon Hill. So here we are. He's already checked his mirror, as we spoke about in the previous clip, and you can see actually that he's having to move the steering wheel around quite a lot just to keep the car in a straight line. Look at how he's waving the steering wheel at these points, and that's because the rear toe link is broken and is having to correct to keep the car in a straight line. You can see here he's bringing the car down to the apex on what we could say is a normal line. He straightens the wheel up and turns it in again. Now, to the untrained eye, that could look like he's allowing Hill to come up the inside and then turning across him again. But actually, it could also be to do with the rear toe link broken and just correcting that as the car's moving around. Here on the bottom right of the screen here, you can see Hill's left front tyre that then makes the contact with Schumacher's pod before it sends him up in the air and into the tyre barrier. With Schumacher out of the race and out of the car, the question was whether Damon Hill's car was damaged enough for him to retire or whether he could continue in the race. But if you look at the footage here, if you watch the front left wishbone, the top wishbone just here, you can see that on the initial contact just here, the wishbone's actually okay, but it's not until the rear right of Schumacher hits the front left of Hill, now we can see that the top wishbone goes through a big compression and actually it pinches the top wishbone and bends it, which eventually puts Hill out of the race. So with both drivers out of the race, Schumacher ended up winning the championship by only 1 point. After the incident, the FIA took no further action, nor did Williams protest. So let me know whose fault you think it was in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to Driver 61 and I'll catch you in my next video just up here.